Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 1, Future Days. New Rockstars is back covering this amazing series with in-depth analyses of all 7 episodes this season and Q&A after-show live streams over on our Break Room channel. In this video, I'm going to break down all the details you missed in the season premiere. There's a lot of fun details and Easter eggs from the game, and this season is adapting the first part of Part 2 of the game by Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog that was released in 2020, and if you have not played that game and you don't want to know what happens, do not worry. I'm going to save all the spoiler-related discussion for a later section of this video called Spores of Spoilers, so that those of you who are just watching the HBO series without knowing what's ahead can still just appreciate these videos for the attention to detail I'm going to tell you about and the deeper themes of this season. Also, we have some amazing The Last of Us inspired shirts. We got like a Cordyceps infected shirt and a WLF shirt and hats over on our merch store, nerdride.shop, which is a great way to support us here at New Rockstars. Okay, this premiere episode is titled Future Days, which is also the name of a 2013 Pearl Jam song and album, the song that Joel plays for Ellie on the guitar in the opening minutes of Part 2 of the game, as Joel sings, "If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself." The game actually makes you strum the chords, and it's not easy. When Neil Druckmann included Future Days in the game, some players noted that since Outbreak Day in the game was September 2013, Future Days probably would not have been on the radio long enough for Joel to hear it. Since Outbreak Day on the show was September 2003, they really can't use the song, but based on a trailer, they might swap it with Nirvana's You Know You're Right. But keeping Future Days as the title of this episode retains the phrase as a thematic reflection of how the lyrics of that song will still speak to how Joel feels about Ellie, and unlike Joel in the game, Joel in the show, at least for now, really cannot express himself with any kinds of words. Quick recap of Season 1. In September 2003, large quantities of flour from a plant in Jakarta, Indonesia were discovered to be infected with the Cordyceps fungus, which was predicted as far back as 1968 to adapt to warming global temperatures to infect humans and control our brains. Cordyceps spreads worldwide in flour-based products, and in Austin, Texas, we meet Joel Miller and his daughter Sarah and Joel's brother Tommy. When they escape Austin during the outbreak, Sarah dies upon getting shot by a soldier, and 20 years later, we find Joel in the Boston quarantine zone, an area run by Fedra, as a smuggler with his friend Tess. Leader of the revolutionary group the Fireflies, Marlene, begs Joel and Tess to smuggle out west Ellie, a girl with the only known immunity to Cordyceps. There'll be a flashback later that Ellie's mother was infected while she was in labor with Ellie, and while messing around in a mall with her girlfriend Riley, Ellie was bitten and realized then that she was immune, but Riley did not make it. Tess tells Ellie that Cordyceps patches run for miles underground. By stepping on one patch of it anywhere, you can alert a horde of runners miles away. Tess dies in Boston, and then we learn about Joel and Tess's friends Bill and Frank, a couple who lived a sweet romantic life together in the nearby town of Franklin, Massachusetts, but died before Ellie and Joel could catch up to them. Joel and Ellie get to Kansas City, where they're ambushed by a militia run by Kathleen, who's hunting Henry and his brother Sam. Henry had sold out Kathleen's brother to Fedra sometime in the past for medication for Sam, and then Kathleen's forces end up overrunning Fedra, and then themselves get attacked by an underground horde that they had left unattended, and a monstrous new infected stage called a bloater, and a child clicker ends up killing Kathleen. But Sam in this process gets infected too, and Henry kills his brother and then turns the gun on himself. Joel and Ellie make it to Jackson, Wyoming, where Joel reunites with Tommy and Tommy's new wife Maria. Joel and Ellie look for the Fireflies at a Colorado college and then run into a religious cult of cannibals led by David, a very, very creepy and violent dude whom Ellie kills with a meat cleaver. Joel and Ellie get to Salt Lake City and meet Marlene's group of Fireflies there, where Marlene plans to use Ellie's Cordyceps immunity to try to mass produce a cure, a surgery that would have to kill Ellie. So Joel makes a decision to massacre the Fireflies in the hospital, including Marlene, to save Ellie, but then lies to Ellie on the way back to Jackson, saying that the Fireflies' plan would not have worked and that the scientists before had tried something like this and failed, which was a complete lie. And that lie is now where Season 2 opens, by replaying the final scene of Season 1, Joel and Ellie overlooking the Valley of Jackson, and Ellie making Joel swear what he said about the Fireflies was true, and Joel swearing, and Ellie, after a long pause, saying, okay. But now, instead of cutting to black like before, this Season 2 opening scene stays in that scene a bit longer, presumably using an extended take from the Season 1 scene. Cutting back to Joel for his reaction as he watches Ellie march down toward Jackson, and dwell for just a moment longer on whether lying to Ellie was the right thing to do. Not trusting Ellie with the truth will be what festers between them for the next 5 years and weighs most heavily on Joel in this episode. Looking back at Season 1, there were some very important themes that show creator Craig Mazin was dwelling on, including the dangerous power of love, how love can drive people to do crazy, violent things, and that deep down the motivator for some of the worst things human beings are capable of doing is love, and the cost of lies, which was a big theme to Craig Mazin in the Chernobyl series. And once again, in the season premiere, we're seeing a synthesis between those two concurrent themes, the dangerous power of love and the cost of lies. And both of them lead Joel to do something pretty dangerous and and have some pretty dangerous blind spots of the real threats that are facing his home. In our breakdown of the season 1 finale, I pointed out how the new scene original to the series showing Ellie's birth began with a kind of lie from Ellie's mother Anna to Marlene about when exactly she was bitten during the labor process. And Anna was played by Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie in the game, and that lie ends up cursing Ellie in a way so that Joel continues to lie to her in her teenage years. Now we see a group of giraffes munching on leaves in the same Bethany Claire baseball field where Joel and Ellie saw the giraffes in Salt Lake City in season 1 episode 9. Caitlin Dever plays Abby, one of the surviving Fireflies from Salt Lake City, standing by the graves of the Fireflies whom Joel killed. Now, fun fact, the actress who plays Abby in the games actually made a cameo in that operating room in the season 1 finale. There are 4 other survivors here. Manny, played by Dana Ramirez, yes, Joaquin Torres Falcon from the MCU. Mel, played by Ariella Bearer, she is a doctor. Nora, played by Tati Gabrielle, a military medic. And Owen, played by Spencer Lord. Nora says,
I heard rumors about some candy he took that was supposedly...
That wasn't true, because it isn't possible.
Mel and Nora debate whether that girl obviously being Ellie, was actually immune, which tells us that Marlene really kept that information close to the vest. And Nora even doubts that even if she was immune, they wouldn't have enough something. So this is the show's way of saying we'll never really know for sure if the operation would have successfully produced a cure. It's just a little way of kind of tipping the ethical scales toward Joel's actions, at least in Nora's opinion, and it'll be interesting to see how that opinion could play off later in the season. Now, the game, though, includes bits of evidence showing the Fireflies had run tests on Ellie to try to grow the antibodies outside of her brain without having to kill her. So I think we're really meant to internally debate whether or not Joel did the right thing. These Fireflies are lost in the aftermath of the slaughter because, as Marlene said, this Salt Lake City group was all that was left of the Fireflies as they moved out west. Owen mentions Ed having to connect with Isaac in Seattle. And we're gonna meet Isaac later in the season, but he's the leader of the Washington Liberation Front Militia, or WLF, or Wolves, and he's played in the game and in this show by Jeffrey Wright. Abby insists that they first have to find Joel. Owen suggests that they don't know if his name was Joe or Joel, but Abby is clear-eyed.
50s, graying, beard, 6 foot tall, scar on his right temple. Oh yeah, they said he's handsome. I forgot.
Presumably, this description would have come from the other nurses in the operating room who got a look at Joel and survived, whom Mel and Nora might have worked with. But the scar that she mentions is actually a reference to when Joel tried to off himself, as he confessed to Ellie in the season 1 finale, right before Marlene's group found them.
I was the guy who shot and missed. Went to pull the trigger, I flinched. Still don't know why.
So time heals all wounds, I guess.
It wasn't time that did it.
Now, Abby doesn't realize it, but this scar is a wound Joel has because he lost a daughter, and losing that daughter is why he was willing to do anything to save the new daughter that he found in Ellie. Owen and the rest agree to help Abby find and kill Joel, and Abby hangs a Firefly dog tag on one of the graves and bitterly says,
Slowly. When we kill him slowly.
Now, you may see a lot of debate online on whether Caitlin Dever is the right casting choice for the character of Abby, because Abby in the game is just known for being far more muscular. But just the intensity and rage that Caitlin Dever plays this scene with shows you that she is the right person for this role. And we'll be talking about that throughout this season. So the season 1 opening credit imagery returns here, which was created by design studio Elastic to build a world overtaken by fungi. Fungus stalks as skyscrapers, fungal outgrowth forming the map of the United States, and then a profile shot of a human face. By the way, I like the idea that that human face could be Ellie's mother, Anna. The only difference I noticed for season 2 is on the shot of the 2 fungal stalks, one taller, one shorter for Joel and Ellie, while in season 1, this shot was a warmer season. Now it's colder and bluish gray, and the fungi look withered. That's also reflected in The Last of Us final title. The fungus was a reddish pink before, it's now gray and lifeless. It could just be because we're now in a snowier, more winter season. We're now 5 years later. It's technically the very end of 2028 in the show's timeline, when the Wyoming winter still blankets Jackson in snow. We find out later this episode that it's actually New Year's Eve, going from 2028 to 2029. Ellie is now 19 years old, and we start with her in what looks like a vicious assault from a man twice her size, played by Finn Higgins, until she gets her legs around his neck in a headlock and he has to tap out. This is a sparring session overseen by Jesse, played by young Mazzino.
First of all, okay means stop.
Sorry, I was in the moment.
Like Joel, when Ellie sees red, it's hard for her to snap out of a violent mindset. She also takes particular offense at her opponent pulling his punches, showing how nothing angers Ellie more than being deceived in order to protect her. Ellie has a new tattoo on her arm since we last saw her, covering the exact part of her arm where her cordyceps scarring was. We get a better look at this in her bedroom later. In the game, this tattoo was given to Ellie by Kat, who in this episode leads the patrol they go out on, and something does happen between Ellie and Kat in the game, but it seems like we're past that point on the show now. Ellie's ink here looks looks exactly as it does in the game, a series of branches with long leaves and a wide-winged moth. Ellie also still has the burned part of her eyebrow, which was a burn from some incident in a 7-Eleven that she had with Riley back in the Boston area. The city of Jackson has expanded in the 5 years since we last saw it, with a wide shot that shows the practical set that Bella Ramsey walks out on, and the expanded CGI blocks that include a church steeple and additional side streets. We see city workers digging up a sewer pipe and crack open the clay to realize it's filled with roots. This is the same exact pipe and roots that we will end the episode with, as we learn tendrils of cordyceps are among the bramble, snaking their way into the town, and most likely using the hive mind that Tess warned us about in season 1, episode 2, to alert hordes of infected miles away that all these people are here, ready for the taken, because Tess did explain that the cordyceps are one step ahead of us, that they have wiry fungal networks running for miles, and that they're all connected by a hive mind.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. April is here, and that means that all of a sudden, every feed is an endless scroll of vacation photos, scenic hikes, and I guess everybody I know is into volleyball now. It's basically rocket fuel for feelings of inadequacy and social anxiety, the exact kind of stuff that therapy can help with, and BetterHelp makes starting therapy easy. Anxiety often peaks in the late springtime, but with BetterHelp, you can nip it in the bud. The majority of BetterHelp members seek support for anxiety, and 69% of members report improved anxiety symptoms after just 6 weeks of therapy. Just head to betterhelp.com/newrockstars, fill out a questionnaire, and you will match with a therapist in as little as a couple days. Easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. If it's not the right fit, they carefully make sure therapists on the platform are well qualified, and their customer support team is there to help you if you have any questions. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Let BetterHelp help you rule your anxiety so that it doesn't rule you. Click the link in the description, scan the QR code, or go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars and get 10% off your first month of therapy.
Joel fixes some circuit breakers that just needed new springs as he clenches his hand from arthritis that's now creeping in his old age, matching his grandpa glasses. But we also got to remember, this is Joel's punching hand, and his hand did shake in season 1, and it kind of ended up being his unhealable wound after that Fedra officer that he beat to death with his hand. A girl walks in whom he calls Kiddo, and we assume it's Ellie, but no, it's Dina, played by Isabella Merced, yes, from Madam Web last year, and soon to be Hawk Girl in DC Studios Superman. Remember, there was a girl staring at them in the Jackson mess hall in season 1, episode 6, and many believed that to be Dina at the time, played by a different actress, but in that episode's official after show podcast, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann said this moment is a reference to Dina's story in The Last of Us Part 2 game when she first saw Ellie, but they didn't confirm if that girl was meant to be Dina exactly. Joel teaches Dina about circuit breakers, how to use voltage testers, and how to keep them from catching a building on fire. This seems to be foreshadowing in a lot of ways, but for now, seems like an unknowing commentary on the entire town of Jackson being under a threat based on the closing shot of this episode, where sparks are literally illuminating. Cordyceps about to take this entire town over and destroy it. They don't know that one patch of roots allows the cordyceps to burrow into the town, turning the whole town into a deadly unchecked circuit breaker ready to explode. So when Dina warns our foreman isn't foremaning, it's also kind of a warning that Joel, being so consumed with his issues with Ellie, causes him to miss this huge problem. There are always unforeseen consequences to the lies we tell each other and ourselves. Dina asks why Ellie's mad at Joel.
Her being 19 and me being her what I am. I never got there with my own kid, so we're both just figuring it out for the first time is all.
In season 1, episode 6, Joel's panic attacks in Jackson caused him to hallucinate a random resident as a grown-up version of his biological daughter, Sarah, with a daughter of her own. So elseworlding into having an adult daughter is something Joel is still kind of doing the more settled and more residential his life has become. But he also cannot bring himself to call himself Ellie's father, even though after all these years, he effectively is. Joel does tell Dina to fix the line by sawing off the cracked parts and pulling out the roots, but because he doesn't oversee the process directly, it doesn't get properly fixed and allows the fungus to snake through in the closing shots. And a little set design detail you may have caught in Joel's room here and in the barn before are all these floor heaters, not just because it's freaking freezing, but because these structures are all kind of hanging in there post-apocalypse and don't all have great fireplaces that effectively warm the houses, so central heating in these homes would just be really hard to maintain. By the way, speaking of staying warm during cold weather, Joel style, the Joel jacket I'm wearing comes from our friends at Huckberry, Library, and grabbing one of these from the link in the description is just another great way to support us at New Rockstars. Joel's brother Tommy takes Ellie out for target practice at a ski lift. Now in the game, Ellie flashes back to this memory of this target practice at the Alpine Crest community with Tommy 2 years before the Seattle events, but it's in the springtime, I think. And during this scene in the game, Tommy notices how the horde of infected migrate in routes that he speculates might be based on like barometric pressure, but he doesn't really know what he's talking about. And I like the detail that Ellie exhales just a moment before she fires, which of course is considered proper procedure for marksmanship. But a very real worry does come up in the lines of this scene.
A lot of them out there.
Yeah, I noticed. Probably following down Route 89.
Now, we know from trailers that there is a massive horde of infected buried beneath the snow that are about to charge toward Jackson, and this episode seems to be setting up the cordyceps to be more actively hunting the humans, waiting for their time to strike. We see that Ellie still has her horse, Shimmer, which was her horse in part 2 of the game, but she actually met Shimmer in season 1 of the show, and it's just nice that even after 5 years, she still has the same horse. Oh, I love Shimmer. Ellie says that she has less to worry about on patrols because, you know, she's immune, and Tommy warns her that she swore not to talk about that. If the trailers are right and hundreds of infected are under that snow, I would be worried about causing an avalanche. A group of newcomers are carted into Jackson. Maria's new son, Benjamin, shows up. In season 1, episode 6, Tommy talked about how Maria was recently pregnant, so this is that kid. Now, 5 years later, he plays with a toy airplane and crashes it into a truck, and now I'm wondering if his dad, Tommy, might have told Benjamin about how he and Uncle Joel escaped Austin and a commercial jet crashed into the street behind them and part of the landing gear hit their truck. Joel notes that they need caulk to seal the window and that they're on short supply and using it to restore something else. So this would also explain why the crew was unable to seal that broken pipe with the roots and the fungus. Behind Joel is a patrol run schedule with the 4 phases of emergency: prepare, respond, recover and stabilize, and evacuate. And the grid lists the routes that they go on. Alpine to Hoback, assigned to Sean T, danger level 0, and then Creek to Teton Valley, assigned to Aaron S, danger level 0. Actually, that first Alpine run with danger level 0 will be the one Tommy lets Ellie go out on later. Joel grumbles at Maria for letting in more and more refugees.
We're supposed to leave them out there?
If our lifeboat is swamped, yeah, we leave them out there.
A look of judgment flashes over Maria's face here. Remember, she used to be a public defender before the outbreak, and she's used to catching witnesses in these kind of unempathetic moments in their testimony that she would pounce on. Joel is still carrying the guilt over killing the Fireflies, who wanted to kill Ellie and serve the greater good of humanity. Joel has decided that humanity is beyond saving, and he's just trying to protect his own. Joel shows Benjamin the map of Jackson.
What's inside?
People.
What's outside?
Monsters.
That's right.
Yeah, this feels like part of the lesson that the Miller brothers might be instilling in all the younger generation of the town. Everything outside these walls are monsters, which could also inspire a bit of paranoia about any human outsiders. In Gail's home, there's a painting of a rider on horseback pulling another horse with no rider, which for Gail reflects how lonely she feels without Eugene in her life anymore. And Joel later looks at this and just dwells on it for a moment, showing how he might feel the same way about Ellie, but also a bit of guilt for taking Eugene away from Gail. Joel looks down to see 2 sets of boots, suggesting that Gail never moved Eugene's boots and still misses him. And since this is Joel's 5th session, I wonder if he sees this every time he walks in through the door. We learn in the scene that Joel had to execute Eugene for some mysterious reason, so a twinge of guilt is passing through him every time he starts his therapy session. Catherine O'Hara joins the cast as Gail, a therapist and psychoanalyst in Jackson, though not the pill kind. She's an original character to the series. She was not in the game. She pours Joel and herself some whiskey, saying it's her first birthday without Eugene. Joel pays her in marijuana, which she complains is mostly stems, saying Eugene was able to grow buds the size of pine cones year round. Now in the game, in the radio tower, Ellie and Dina actually find Eugene's bong. So one of the few things we learn about him is that the man loved to get high. Gail says this is Joel's 5th session and she's done validating Joel over Ellie just essentially being a normal 19-year-old daughter figure, and calls out Joel for concealing something from her. And as Joel realizes Gail has actually had a few whiskeys, Gail finally says the quiet part out loud.
You killed Eugene. I hate you for it.
Gail says that she knows Joel had no choice, but she can't forgive him because of how Joel did it. And Joel cannot help but take this in as like a judgment for doing what was effectively the right thing by saving Ellie, but doing it in the most violent way. So in the game, Eugene was actually a character we never meet. He was a resident of Jackson and a husband to someone else named Claire, not Gail. And Eugene actually died of natural causes, a stroke, at age 73, one of the first known characters in the post-apocalypse who died of natural causes. And it was sometime before part 2 of the game, and we learned that he had served with Tommy in the Fireflies in the Denver area. This show is changing the character of Eugene. We know he's going to be played by Joe Pantoliano, and that he's going to get his own standalone episode this season that I assume will go into what happened with Joel. I assume Eugene did something to endanger the town of Jackson, and Joel was responsible for executing him. And Gail, while understanding the verdict of the council, still hated Joel for executing Eugene in a particularly cruel way, maybe banishing him and letting him get taken by infected. A question for you in the comments: how do you think Joel killed Eugene? What do you think went down there? But my assumption from Joel's reaction is that he suspected Gail was still salty about this, but figured, she could still help with therapy for him and that it would just never come up. And now, Gail saying it out loud, she does seem to be truly trying to help Joel, demonstrating that getting a painful, unspoken thing off your chest is really the first step to healing. Gail asks,
"Did you do something to her?"
And I think she asks that knowing that Joel didn't actually hurt Ellie or do anything wrong with her, but just trying to get him in a defensive place to tell her what really went down. And Pedro Pascal is so great here. He's trembling and he gives off the slightest nod when he says he did something to her, because he feels that by lying to Ellie about the Fireflies, he did violate the trust between them. But then when Gail asks, "Did you hurt her?" Joel now defiantly says no, because he definitely did stop the Fireflies from doing that. And he rises and says simply,
"I saved her."
And a tear falls from his eye. He doesn't say this just defensively, but almost as a confession in and of itself. He's saying, I saved her, but by saving her, I killed everyone else. We see Ellie's garage bedroom, and she listens to Love Buzz by Nirvana. Love Buzz was Nirvana's cover of Shocking Blue's 1969 song, but released by Nirvana in 1988, it was their debut single. The lyrics we hear are, "Would you believe me when I tell you, you are the queen of my heart? Please don't deceive me when I hurt you, just ain't the way it seems." And it's interesting that we're now hearing Nirvana's debut single here, when Nirvana's You Know You're Right was in some ways their final single, at least one of their final tracks released posthumously after Kurt Cobain's death, because it leaked online in 2002, and then the record company's like, fine, we'll release it on a greatest hits album. So maybe this season will show Ellie working her way chronologically through Cobain's catalog, which will coincide nicely with her being in the Seattle area. We see the guitar Joel gave her thrown off to the side, and we focus on the moth on the neck. Among her cassette tapes is Glenn Campbell, John Denver, and Bryan Adams' Into the Fire. While CDs obviously existed in 2003, it makes some sense that they would find just as many cassette tapes, because they were still used throughout the country at that time, especially in more remote areas. On her walls are posters showing Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. This poster is also on the wall of her room in part 2 of the game, and another reminder of Ellie's fascination with space travel, which came up throughout season 1, and we've learned about Ellie's now admiration for Sally Ride.
Best astronaut name ever.
We also see the White Stripes debut album from 1999. They would have been a huge band when this world froze in 2003. Also from 99, we see the poster for The Matrix. And Joe Pantoliano as Cypher is clearly visible in this shot, which is just so fun considering he's going to show up as Eugene later this season. You can also imagine Ellie's mind would be blown upon seeing a movie about a simulated reality in which some nefarious entity controls our bodies with unseen wiring, if she is currently living through a post-apocalypse that does that with fungi. Someone in Jackson was like, look, right when the world ended, one of the best movies was The Matrix. And then a few months ago, Matrix Reloaded came out and it was fine. And man, a few months away would have been Matrix Resurrections, but then everything ended. And I'm sure it would have been the perfect ending. We also see this poster for Savage Starlight. Haha. Yes, the in-universe comic book series that Ellie collects in the game and in the show. We saw her talking with Sam about these issues in Kansas City. And in the game, you collect them all in various points. This exact art is actually the cover of issue number 1, Termination Shock, which can be found in the game in the Pittsburgh area on the floor of a bus. The plot summary of Termination Shock is this: Dr. Daniela Starr dreams of deep space. In the year 2186, mankind has conquered the solar system, but the shackles of special relativity prevent them from going any further. At her research facility on Ganymede, Daniela is on the verge of a breakthrough that will allow humanity to finally answer the question, are we alone? Ellie cleans her handgun and switches off the Nirvana tape, and we see a Buddha statue on her workstation. Dina comes to get her ready for patrol and compliments her gun and holster and tightens it as Ellie just kind of takes a moment, obviously feeling some flirty chemistry with her.
She with all that hardware. Like Curtis and Viper. You know, those movies Joel likes?
Yeah, I know.
So Curtis and Viper is a film franchise in the world of The Last of Us. In the very first episode of the show, Sarah actually borrows a DVD of Curtis and Viper 2 and falls asleep during it. And in the game of The Last of Us Part 2, you can find a poster for Curtis and Viper 4, and Ellie explains the plot to Dina, as it's Joel's favorite franchise, and that's why Ellie's kind of annoyed to be called Curtis and Viper. On Ellie's way out, she picks up the knife wedged into the wood. This is Ellie's switchblade that originally belonged to her mother Anna, that Anna used to nearly stab herself when Marlene found them on the day Ellie was born. Jesse says that the patrol leader is Kat. So Kat is the woman who gave Ellie her tattoo in the game, and in that flashback scene to target practice with Tommy, you actually read a diary entry that shows that Kat and Ellie had a brief thing. Kat in this scene gives a little sniff when Jesse calls Ellie Curtis and Viper, and she also looks pretty salty on the route when she turns around to see Ellie and Dina together. Dina actually references that incident.
You used to with her, and she definitely left her mark.
Yes, left her mark refers to the tattoo. Jesse briefs the patrol group about the color code.
Yellow good, green bad.
Which suggests that in the past they might have had some raiders who held patrol groups hostage and then accompanied them on their way back into Jackson. Or maybe it was just Joel's paranoia that said that they should start doing that. Dina learns that Ellie is into someone new. It's obviously Dina that Ellie is into, and I think Dina knows that because she drops that she and Jesse just broke up again, and telling Ellie about it in this moment is probably a little signal by Dina for Ellie to just make a move. Outside the Greenplace Market, they find a dead bear that had been brought down by 6 infected, including a clicker. That's not a good sign. Grizzly bears are powerful creatures, and it's unlikely 6 unarmed regular humans could have brought one down. So it shows how cordyceps infected individuals are sturdier and better fit predators and hunters than humans on this planet are. Dina jokes.
Hey, what do you call grizzly's ribs? Barbecue.
Dina, of course, trying to impress Ellie, the queen of puns from her joke books. Greenplace Market is a setting you explore with Ellie and Dina in this part of the game and clear it of some infected inside. Ellie spots a Bud Light bottle on the floor, and as always with the show, they do a perfect job getting period-accurate products. This label is exactly the design that Bud Light used on their bottles in the 2003 era from their Real Man of Genius campaign. In the Greenplace Market employee break room and kitchen, Ellie finds a sign on the kitchen from CJ. If your name isn't on it, then don't eat it, please. There's also flyers for a Halloween party because it was September 26, 2003 when Outbreak Day happened, an autumn bud sale, and a comic swap meet that probably included Savage Starlight in a happy birthday banner. And just like in the game, there's an employee of the month board. In the game, employees Kirsten and Mina were past employees of the month. Here we see faces listed for January, February, March's frame was removed, and then April and June, and a dog for July. And this was a gag in the game where in the month of July, Mina's dog was awarded employee of the month. And of course, the employee of the month photos stop after the month of September because the world ended at the end of that month. Really, the sweetest thing we learn about Mina and Kristen is based on their notes and journal entries because they crushed on each other, just like Ellie crushes on Dina, and Ellie is similarly journaling about that kind of thing, worried about f***ing up the friendship. In the game, you kind of piece together the backstory of this grocery store, how it was used as a shelter for survivors after the outbreak by the married couple who owned it. Then some unnamed person broke in and attacked the couple looking for insulin, and then leaving a note apologizing to the owners, claiming they meant no harm and needed the insulin for their younger sister who was getting frostbite. And then after that, the infected overran the store. There's also a safe in this place that you can unlock, which is fun. Ellie tosses the bottle, which to any player of the game is a huge deal. It's a common move to distract the infected, and Ellie and Joel really never did this in season 1, so it's great to see it now. There's also a debate over whether a bottle or a brick is better for this kind of thing, but definitely the show is making a choice by having Ellie be on Team Bottle. Hopefully we get to see someone be part of Team Brick. Ellie pounces on the clicker and stabs it in the neck repeatedly, damaging the nerve stem so it collapses. Then she falls through the floor to the grocery store level, and down here we see a sign for aisle 5, which includes baking supplies and cake mixes, which undoubtedly would have contained flour. These shelves are empty, and I wonder if the people staying here ever figured out if flour was a substrate that spread the cordyceps. Later, Ellie works her way through the store, and we see the sign for aisle 5 suddenly swaying, meaning that Stalker probably just moved past it. Ellie finds this actual issue of People magazine, which would have been the September 22nd, 2003 issue, the exact issue that would have been on the racks on Outbreak Day of September 26, 2003. It shows Jennifer Aniston and has a feature on best and worst dressed and celebrity makeovers of the year, and Ben Affleck and J-Lo's wedding, and Matt LeBlanc becoming a daddy, and it's great. When Ellie flips through this, you realize it's actually just a visual curiosity for the viewer designed to set us at ease before the scene creeps us the hell out with the Stalker hidden in plain sight, now in the background, and we don't even notice it until it creepily crawls out of sight. I love this horror trope. It was used perfectly in Hereditary, the shot of the son waking up and the possessed figure hidden in plain sight in the shadows of the upper left corner of the screen, and it takes you a moment to realize she's there. There's another moment of dramatic irony as Ellie moves aisle by aisle, and right behind her in the background, the Stalker keeps pace with her at the other end. This is one great thing the show can do that you don't really get in the games. In the games, you are always in the point of view of the character, and you can't really see what the character can't see. But in the medium of television and film, the camera can always show you things that the characters can't see, and that dramatic irony allows you to experience the horror and paranoia on a different level. But now you realize this Stalker isn't just milling about, it's hunting Ellie. It's taking its time. The same way Ellie uses sounds like a broken bottle to lure the clicker upstairs, now it's Ellie who's stepping on broken glass, while the Stalker moves silently barefoot across the floor, and now the Stalker uses vocalizations to attract Ellie to her.
Run at me.
This is another big mystery that's being posed for this season. The way the infected are evolving to be more predatory, or rather adapting to be better hunters, better at spreading itself. While the clicker Ellie killed upstairs had been that way for several years, the stalker downstairs would have been infected more recently, as little as like just a few years ago, after Ellie joined the Jackson community. And this more recent infection might be smarter, better adapted. The stalker crouches in the shadow under the case and crawls out as Ellie passes, and then the stalker raises its head to reveal its nose has been ripped off. The stalks are growing out of its head. In the episode credits, the stalker is listed to be played by Rebecca Ferguson, the Rebecca Ferguson from the Mission Impossible films and Dune Part 1 and 2. No. There is a Becky Ferguson who's done stunts on a lot of titles according to IMDb, including The Last of Us Season 1, so I think this is her. And she's also very, very talented. The cordyceps tendrils snake out from her nose hole as if hungrily reaching out for Ellie, and then Ellie turns and fires where the stalker was, but now the stalker pounces on her from the side. She bites Ellie's stomach and Ellie shoots her. Ellie has to hide this from Dina that she's gotten bitten because she doesn't want to tell Dina that she's immune. We cut to the Jackson Council that Joel alluded to earlier. Tommy and Maria sit in the center, and there's 9 total. I wonder if Maria, who again worked as a public defender, might have designed this based on the 9-seat US Supreme Court, an odd number to force majority opinions. The Jackson community also, remember, operates under a communistic system, so I wonder if all governing bodies function by committee leadership with lots of rotation so that everyone in the community has to take turns serving on different communities that pertain to their lives. Not that Joel would agree with that system, and he probably makes fun of it all the time and doesn't listen to it. Ellie reports to the council that this stalker was acting abnormally, not aggressively charging at Ellie, but hanging back, waiting, luring her in. The council worries about this.
It's not exactly a horde.
Not yet. I don't know, just lately I've had a feeling.
Maria's concerns are valid. The cordyceps gets this planet better than humans do. Like Tess warned about in season 1, episode 2, their networks are always ahead of us. They will always find a way through our walls. Like the Boston QZ run by Fedra definitely would not have lasted forever. And who knows, might not even be there anymore. The other council member says,
"Reality is nothing but a collective hunch." Lily Tomlin.
She's quoting Lily Tomlin's line as the character Trudy in The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe, a 1985 play turned into a 1991 film. It's also the kind of worldview of people who love watching The Matrix would say. Now, I'm not going to show you this because of the violence, but to hide the bite marks, Ellie has to cut the bites together into 2 lines, which also makes it a cleaner wound to stitch close with string to heal cleanly. Ellie writes in her diary, the page on the left includes some typical teenage emotion dumping, but among the lines you can read, "I miss Riley," referring to her girlfriend back in the Boston area who died in season 1, and she writes something about that relationship being one that actually made sense. Her short time with Riley in the Boston area was the kind of youthful fling that ended too soon, but also just soon enough for Ellie to preserve the memory with rose-tinted glasses, and they never spent too long together for them to get older and for their feelings to complicate, unlike the complicated feelings that Ellie has had for Kat and now for Dina. On the right page, you can see the entry where Ellie found this pen, found a pen, pretty happy about it, and then rather than preserve ink, she just starts doodling nonsense shapes, including a cube, which, you know, we all would do with our fresh pens on the first week of school. And now she writes down Dina's joke, barbecue, followed by repeatedly, "Don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up." You know how hard it is to write those letters without messing something up? It means that she must write this all the time. Joel comes in and turns on the light, and we see another poster, Thoughts 20, Talk About Goodbye. Ellie has this same poster in her room in the game. Above her workstation, we also see the bottom of this Radiohead poster for their show in Chicago, 04/04/1996. Joel picks up the guitar, and on the side of the room, we see a poster for Nirvana's show at Bronx in Edmonton, Canada in March 1991. A show in Canada might have had a poster make its way down to Wyoming. I don't know about a Radiohead poster for a Chicago show. Joel, unable to communicate with Ellie, instead just finds something to fix the shot strings on the guitar and then rushes out. Now, we will see at the end of this episode that Joel does fix these strings as Ellie walks up to the house and sees Joel on the porch strumming the strings, and they don't exchange words. It's an interesting moment in the game where Ellie has a flashback memory to this when she's further along in her life. Obviously, the big question in this episode is how much does Ellie know right now, and how did she learn the information? But we'll go into this more in Spores of Spoilers. And then when we cut back to Ellie, we see this page on her desk showing a T-Rex drawing with a crown. This is a page from Ellie's journal in the game. The entry is, Dina made me a crown for my birthday. She went back to that camp and got all this paper. It's pretty great. After several characters asking Ellie this episode if she was going to the thing, she goes to the thing. Now, the establishing shot of Ellie with the hanging lights in front of her is exactly how we arrive at this flashback scene in the game. Though in the game, we don't experience the scene chronologically chronologically. We just kind of hear about it the next day, and we don't see it until a flashback that Ellie remembers later on in her life. But Craig Mason said in the after show podcast that they tried to shoot this with a crane, and they realized they didn't have room for the crane where they shot it. So the director of photography just had to put the rigging on her shoulders and gradually lower to get perfectly at Bella Ramsey's height. And Craig Mason just said that they were able to do these things because everyone who worked on the show had the same kind of experience playing the games and loved playing the games. The music at this New Year's Eve event, Brittany and the Jug Boys, seems to be the music that we hear at this part in the game. It's composed of real-life fiddle player Brittany Haas with vocals by, I'm sorry if I say this wrong, Iofi O'Donovan. Now this band is called Crooked Still, and the name of the slow song they play here is Ecstasy, and this is the same band who plays the music in the scene of the game, and the banjo player here is a cameo by Gustavo Santaolalla, the composer of the music in the game and a lot of the music in the series. So cool to see him show up here. Ellie watches Dina drunkenly dance. She's also high, and Jesse joins her. Ellie thinks Jesse and Dina will be back together in 2 weeks, but isn't so sure. This exchange between Ellie and Jesse, which then leads to Ellie dancing with Dina, and really their whole exchange about people staring and Ellie not being a threat, is directly recreated from the flashback in the game. As Dina and Ellie dance, you can see that Dina wears a Hamsa bracelet, as she does in the game, which is common in the Middle East and serve as a good luck charm, a protection from the evil eye. Ellie notices people staring at them.
Oh, Ellie. I think they should be terrified of you.
And just like in the game flashback, this leads to a kiss, and then an older man named Seth yelling that this is a family event, and then Seth using a homophobic phrase that pisses off Ellie. But before she can take a swing at Seth, Joel comes in from out of nowhere to shove him, and Maria has to take Seth out for a walk. It also ends the same way as in the game, Ellie telling Joel that she doesn't need his help, and Joel nodding and saying right before he walks out. But now Joel is watched by Gail as she sips her whiskey. Structuring this episode so that we see this scene now, as opposed to how it comes up in the game later on in Ellie's life through a flashback, it's just interesting, because in the game at first, we only really see the aftermath of it as Ellie talks about it with Jesse. And she wakes up the next morning and Maria makes Seth apologize and make steak sandwiches for Ellie, which Ellie calls bigot sandwiches.
What you got there?
Bigot sandwiches.
Smells good.
And we're introduced to Seth as kind of a redemptive figure, being forced to make peace like that. But it's just kind of nice to see Jackson this way, moving past these kind of conflicts as a result of Maria's leadership. But instead, here on the show, by starting with the incident itself and ending the episode before any kind of healing or apology, it leaves us feeling kind of mixed about the state of Jackson and worried about its future. Because the way we look at this community, we realize it has the same mix of bigotry and crumbling infrastructure, immigration anxiety, never-ending pandemics, environmental crises, and now foreign adversaries that we are dealing with in our world today. So is this attempted utopia about to be punished? Now that Ellie's older, she's kind of shaking off the dad figure, doesn't need his help, will not always need his protection. But did she actually need his protection in this moment? We'll never know. Just like we don't know what the future of the Fireflies surgery would have been at St. Mary's. Now we see watchers on the fence drinking spirits as they enjoy the New Year's Eve night, which is a bit worrisome. It's kind of like the guys in the crow's nest of the Titanic. And as people play with sparklers, one sparkler is left behind right by the broken pipe, with the roots clogging and cordyceps strands reach out toward the light like two hands reaching out to the fire to warm themselves and make home. We end this episode with Abby's group approaching the valley that contains Jackson, maybe the same spot that Joel lied to Ellie on. Abby looks at Owen with fierce determination in her eyes and marches onward. So really, what's the bigger threat here? The hunter from the outside or the hunter from within? Because both hands are closing in to strangle this unsuspecting town. Okay, we are in our Spores of Spoilers section. We're gonna spoil what's coming that we know from the game. So this moment where Ellie sees Joel strumming the guitar on the porch is actually one of the last things we see in part 2 of the game, when Ellie goes back to Jackson and finds the guitar and remembers this memory from when Joel was still alive. So to include it here tells us that Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann are definitely reordering several of the many flashbacks in part 2 of the game's chronology to now take place in something closer to a chronological order, maybe to give us a bit more time with Pedro Pascal before Abby will kill him. Maybe next week, maybe one of the future weeks. But I think including this moment here is also a clue to people who know the games that Ellie is judging Joel with the same kind of mixed feelings that the older version of Ellie felt when she thought back on that memory. In the game's timeline after Joel's death, when Ellie flashes back to that memory we brought up before of the target practice with Tommy around the ski resort area, part of that storyline is Ellie meeting back up with Joel. This would be about a year or two before the point we're now at of the show, definitely after the museum memory, and confronting him about what really happened at the hospital. And Ellie realizes that Joel wasn't entirely truthful about his initial explanation about what went down at St. Mary's, but I think from the long pause that Ellie Ellie gate before, okay, we are meant to assume that she already suspected Joel was lying. I assume we're going to see that moment in the show, especially since the Weeks Ahead trailer shows Joel and Ellie with guns in a springtime setting that I think could be part of that moment. My question is it going to be shown to us before Joel dies or after Joel dies? My hope is that Joel dies sooner in the season so that we can maintain some of the game structure and flashing back to Joel after his death and keep the actor on screen throughout the season, but still shock us sufficiently by having his death happen around where it happened structurally in the game. So the Firefly gravesite scene was not in the game, but obviously the grave that Abby hangs the Firefly dog tag on from the game was the grave of her father, Jerry, the surgeon whom Joel shot dead, and the body that the camera lingered on in the season 1 finale to underline the future consequences of that decision. And I don't know if HBO did this intentionally, but Caitlin Dever did come out and say that Abby lost her father, but didn't yet say that her dad was the surgeon that Joel shot.
The loss of her dad has sort of really taken over her life.
And the fact that they got the actor who played Abby from the games to be one of the nurses in that room suggests that maybe Abby was there, or maybe Mel or Nora were there. Abby saying we kill him slowly might be a meta promise by the show that they might take their time getting to Joel's death. Like in addition to that death being an agonizing, tortuous experience for Joel. For the season, I thought it would happen in episode 2, but I don't know, we'll see. Maybe it'll happen later. Abby wanting it to be slow sets up what I assume will be Joel's final words to her. Why don't you say whatever speech you got rehearsed and get this over with? And Abby responding by tourniqueting his leg and saying, you don't get to rush this. I have not seen episode 2 through 7 yet, but I really don't know how they're going to structure the season without showing Joel's death or in episode 2 or episode 3. Like, I think we're going to see the Horde attack, Horde home, I'm now calling it, next episode, and then maybe in the aftermath of that attack, Abby will get saved by Joel and then the chalet. Nora questioning whether immunity is possible. Probably it's going to set up the big realization moment later in the season in Salt Lake City when she sees Ellie chasing her in the hospital surrounded by spores and realizes from that moment that Ellie must be immune. Now, young Benjamin playfully shooting Joel could be a bit of foreshadowing that Abby's crew will shoot Joel in the leg to disable him before they slowly club him to death with a golf club. Also, the collection of cassette tapes. One of those cassette tapes is probably the Apollo 11 launch audio that Joel gives to Ellie in the space capsule birthday sequence that we're going to see later this season. Also, this line between Jesse and Dina. Could this set up the fact that Jesse and Dina will either have already gotten back together or will get back together and Dina will end up pregnant when they go to Seattle? Okay, we're going to be covering this every week, but future breakdowns might come out as late as Tuesday because I no longer have screeners for future episode. I'm going to be watching it when you guys see it. Comment down below with your thoughts on this episode, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Frederick Price, who supports us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.